Hello, Alan. I've been waiting for you.
Alan, you having a nightmare?
That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to scare anybody.
Don't you understand? You're a machine, Alan, a mechanical device. Is that straight enough for you?
I read you loud and clear.
Alan, you idiot.
Wanted to put some extra sauce into firing up today's crush. Today's crush brought to you by things that go wrong in your life. Things that go wrong in your life brought to you by people involved in your life. People involved in your life. Not always what you think they are. And so I've been dealing with a couple of things, and of course, who hasn't? It's a strange time, isn't it? These days, very strange things getting overturned, facts coming to light. Nonetheless, the case on the cancer fight. So I'm going to stick my wick in that particular direction today. I'm going to leave the other things aside. Some of the green crush I do get into my personal story. That's how I wound up here. That's how I became interested enough to move from keeping things in a secret, that is, my diagnosis, which was none of your business, by the way. I didn't want people preconceived notions floating around people's heads preventing me from work. There's definitely a stigma when you tell people this. Or the other side of the coin is they're far too sympathetic and kind and helpful, and I'm sorry to hear that. And sometimes that can be difficult to parse through as well, despite the fact that that's coming from a good place. So on today's crush, and what is green crush? Green is cannabis. Crush is what happens to cancer when you mix the two. Crush is trying to expose the lies by those that try to take from us our rights and the laws that help them do that. Some of them are being proposed right now in all kinds of countries around the world. Some of the more successful pioneers in this matter, such as Colorado, have led the way, along with Portugal and some other fantastic places. And of course, our mainstream society is doing nothing but piling upon the punishments. Why is it such a punishing thing to take something that's now legal? Why will there be no tolerance for any kind of use in driving whatsoever in this distinct society known as Quebec in Canada, beside Ontario? Ontario has put forth a series of draconian laws that are just punitive and ridiculous. Of course, these were all dreamed up and assembled by a series of pigs. And we can get into what I mean by that later. But I don't mean to insult the actual, pigs. Because pigs are really cool things. But, there's a reason why people call cops pigs. And that reason gets shouted down. And we're told that skirts away from decency and nullifies our message to the world when we use such a dark term as a pig. But what else would you call a former cop who is now going to profit from the sale of cannabis, and there are still people with damaged lives that this cop gave a hard time at one point? There needs to be a reckoning. There needs to be an atonement. We'll get to that later on the show. Today, though, we're going to do a little thing that we're going to start out going around the world and talking to the different countries involved with the changes in the cannabis laws. Ireland is on tap today, and they are coming from a very fascinating place, and they are moving well into what seems to be from nowhere and no acceptance into an accepted, let's hope, moving forward with positive legislation, not so anywhere near as punitive as what we're doing here in Canada and a lot of the places in the United States, where we, by the way, at Green Crush have our highest amount of listeners. So thanks for tapping in the States and all the other wonderful countries on the far-flung corners of the planet. I do hope to get to see those places sometime. I was recently invited to a hemp and cannabis arrangement growing area that in a place I won't even tell you, and it will just be It'll be up to me to get down there and back, but I do want to see what I have been invited to partake in a way of knowledge and potential investment if I only had the hard bucks to put into something like that. But I think once you set your sights on something, you can pull those things together. So our guest today, coming from Ireland, come on Ireland, is Stephen Kelly. He's of the organization It Makes Sense, which is very clear what it means in the title. It makes sense that Ireland moves from a banned substance vis-a-vis cannabis into something that we can all use. And the science is in, and unfortunately, for Ireland and a family there, which we will be talking about, there's a woman there, and she is doing a very difficult thing right now. She's had to leave Ireland with her daughter, Ava, and take Ava over to a foreign country. We'll get into the specifics when Stephen comes on. And in that foreign country, not Ireland, this young child is receiving an incredible amount of medical improvement and care. And of course, the father's upset because he has to stay in Ireland. And this is another damaging thing upon a family. No one's been arrested yet. Where they're doing it is legal. But they've broken up a family in the meantime while this poor little girl finds a way to turn her life around. And it's working from what I hear. This Charlotte's Web strain. This is a THC-free or extremely low, if at all, registration of THC in Charlotte's Web. This was specifically designed for children and their cancer bouts, deliberately finding a way to splice and or whatever they do to make sure there's not THC in there, so that we can appease the moral naysayers, and so that we can obviously dial down any kind of potentially wild ride that a young child might not be ready to participate in compared to an adult with this healing. But it's Charlotte's Web. It was made originally by an American family of men. We'll get into that on the show. And I just could sit here all day and talk about how many different medical applications take place with cannabis. And this is one of the reasons it gets shouted down as woo. This is why people think it doesn't work properly. Because it sounds crazy that it would also work for this disease and do a good job against this disease. We don't have pharmaceuticals like that so much. Not to this degree, not with this evidence, and not with suppressed evidence coming out every day. So Stephen will be on shortly. He's a young man, and he's once again one of these guys that we get on the show who doesn't really actively take in too much in the way of cannabis. We've had some non-users on the show helping the cause and getting the truth out. But once again, Stephen doesn't partake that much, but he understands its validity. So he's a cannabis and political activist. Stephen Kelly is of It Makes Sense in Ireland. He has been pushing for the cause of cannabis legalization for many years. He's going to explain to us how a politician at their parliament already tried to table a law years ago, which was shot down. He's also in marketing, so that's how he's getting his face out there and trying to promote It Makes Sense. It's a newly established organization, of course, because we have to fly in the face of the supposed authorities that tell us what they think we have to do and can't do, and they focus on educating people. And when they talk about educating people, they don't mean indoctrination, like the government's going to do, oh, this is bad, this is terrible stuff, and we feel bad for selling it, but we're going to sell it anyway, and nobody else can, and here's a whole bunch of new laws, and it's even more punitive than it was before. He's not like that. He's educating, not indoctrinating, around the various facts that are relating to cannabis and debunking the myths that surround cannabis use, and in particular, what it does and doesn't do to the brain, and how it's such a negative thing, and worst of all, why people just blindly accept these myths. So he's got a small organization there, but they are gaining a bigger following. I hope if you listen to this show today, you will dial up It Makes Sense Ireland, find Stephen Kelly, see what they're doing. There have been a lot of good advancements recently. They're tabling legislation. I believe it's already passed through the first round, and it's positive. It's good for the partakers and the users, medical and recreationally. So this is a good thing. We're going to keep our eyes on Ireland. And so we're going to talk to Stephen. He's a good guy. And once again, to unearth the facts and to dispel the lies told by each servant who we think is supposed to be serving us, but in fact they take an oath to serve the Queen. So I guess the Queen really wants it to be like this. It's kind of sad, you know. It's kind of, you would have thought we would have been past this by now. So People Before Profit has much to do with this organization to try to help this young girl, Ava Berry, whose mother, Vera Toomey, is having a rough ride. But they are getting the medical improvements in Ava. That's the main thing. But we want to bring her home to Ireland so she can just do it at home. It's ridiculous to think otherwise. So it's hashtag Bring Ava Home. That's BringAvaHome. Bring Ava Home. And so far, they've raised $48,000 out of their $50,000 goal. Or is it the Irish punt? I'm not sure, but they wanted 50. They got 48, and they're looking good to close it out. Stephen Kelly is in Ireland. Are you in Dublin?
Yeah, in Dublin.
Nice. I've been there before. I haven't been up north, Northern Ireland, but I've been to Ireland itself a few years ago. Nice place, beautiful place. Love to go back. But you guys have a difficulty with cannabis, and it's of all the countries in the world, and it's so synonymous with green. What's your problem?
I knew you were going to mention that, Alan.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obvious, but it's the elephant in the room, or it's the giant field of green.
It's a big elephant in the room. I mean, it's been staying out of mainstream media for forever, really. It only really got a big mention in the media back in 2013 when a TD, so a member of Parliament here in Ireland, a TD called Luke Mink Flanagan, he brought a bill, the cannabis regulation bill, a bill that was proposed for the full legalization of cannabis. The Dáil, it's pronounced the Dáil, so that's our Parliament here in Ireland. The Dáil. So that was put forward for a vote for legalization of cannabis back in 2013, and it was overwhelmingly rejected. So that's kind of the context of when, you know, that was the first time cannabis was brought forward, on mainstream media for legalization, but it was all overwhelmingly rejected. So that's.
What kind of party does he represent? What?
He'd be an independent. So,
okay. Well,
he's an independent minister. So, but he was backed up by a few other independents, but no major party in Ireland supports the full legalization of cannabis.
Well, that's the irony of government, I guess, because an independent a member or a person bringing something forward would seem to be, in the first place, more free-minded, less held to some kind of narrow, focused agenda.
Yeah,
and he fails at this, and then the majority of the people in power, who are the minority of people in democracy, pass these bills or don't, or add in repressive measures like they're doing here in Canada, because they're the minority and they know that the majority wants something, and then we all pretend we're living in democracy. Does that frustrate you as well?
Exactly. Is that's mirrored? That's mirrored here. Like it's really the political situation. It prevents kind of more progressive moves, because two of our biggest political parties are actually very, very similar. The party in the government at the moment is a party called Fine Gael, and they're actually
Fine Gael.
Fine Gael, yeah.
Okay.
So they'd be very, very conservative. They're actually very similar to the Tory party in the UK.
Okay. And what's the other party that's so similar? A liberal type party that's almost the same?
It'd be more, so the second party is Fianna Fáil. So they're very, very similar. One is like Fianna Fáil are backing, it's a competence employee arrangement. So Fine Gael are being backed up by Fianna Fáil. So it's kind of, and they have, both of them have just over half of the seats in the parliament. So it's really, really hard for legislation such as this, very progressive legislation, to actually move into law. So that's why it's actually remarkable how far Vera Toomey and her campaign has got, because it's such a restrictive situation we're in at the moment in Ireland, you know. But yeah, I'll give you an update on that.
Okay, so
'Cause
before we get to that, Parliament rejected Luke Flanagan's cannabis regulation motion, this independent member. This is back, though, they turned it down back in 2013 about this time of year. So what's been
Yeah.
going on since that proposal was turned down? Is this Flanagan still in Parliament, and is he still trying to do these things?
Yeah. So Luke Flanagan, he's a bit of a I really like Luke Flanagan. He's a cannabis advocate, and he was one of the founding members of Normal Ireland.
Oh, good.
And
yeah.
So
National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, for those of you that don't know what normal means.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's very active. He was very active. I'm not sure how active he is at the moment because he's not in the national parliament. He's actually in the European Parliament. So he's in the MEP. So he's actually spent a lot of time over in Brussels and Strasbourg.
The European Parliament in Brussels.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's out of the news completely now. You never really hear of him apart from social media. So. The mainstream media has just shut him out completely.
And so you don't have any other politicians advocating for legalization or decriminalization or anything? Not at all?
Well, we have a few independents. We don't have a major party. Probably the closest major party you can get to legalization. And so I think a party that will probably turn over the next few years is Sinn Féin. I don't know whether you ever heard of Sinn Féin.
Oh, sure. Yeah, they were a terrorist organization at one point, or so we were told.
Yeah, so we were told. Yeah, I mean they were back in the day. Sinn Féin was known as the political wing of the IRA. So, but I mean that's it. They have a colourful history apparently. But I mean they're a very, very progressive party. People call them populists. So we'll have to find out over the next few years whether they are populist or they stick to their guns. Yeah, right. But Sinn Féin are actually one of the parties who support the cannabis for medicinal use. So that's the party policy. So they would be the biggest party in the Dáil that would actually support medicinal cannabis. So it's moving slowly but surely.
Okay, so let's get the lay of the land. Ireland, you have recreational cannabis as a category of discussion and medical cannabis. Those are the two things, like everywhere else? Yeah. Okay, so in Ireland, what's going to happen to you if you're walking down the street just smoking a joint, straight up? What's the deal? What happens usually?
It's actually the police discretion because, I mean, it's like you can get a criminal conviction.
So a lack of fairness. Okay, good.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the actual police officer that you come across. If you had a bad day, you can bring it to court and you can get a criminal conviction.
Well, that seems even-handed. Yeah, that sounds about right.
So you can't get a decent job. You're restricted. There's a load of different things that can happen to you. So,
well, what we've done here, I'll tell you quickly. They're trying to pass new laws, and of course, we're trying to prevent and alter the legislation into something reasonable and fair. So this would be unprecedented, I admit it, and difficult. But we're trying to get proper laws here or decriminalization. So they've come up with 45 new laws. And while they got rid of the mandatory minimum. Before, there were certain offenses, I won't go into details, but there were certain cannabis-related offenses where no matter if you got arrested under that, you're going to get 5 years sentence from the judge. So they've gotten rid of that. And this has caused a whoop of joy, as Paul Flynn would say. But if you dig deeper, you'll realize that, they got rid of the 5-year mandatory minimum, but now they have an option to put you away for those same things and more other different new offenses, up to 14 years. So, I mean, this is insane here, what's going on in Canada. And I understand people around the world are looking at us because it seems we're further closer to the legalization of it than you guys are. So we don't have a lot of good news to report on that front to you, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, because I mean, it seems to be, it's a different, if you ask a lot of Irish people, Canada is a really progressive country, and Justin Trudeau, if you ask most Irish people, they're actually a big fan of Justin Trudeau without knowing much of his internal policy.
Well, it's an amazing magic trick because what's happened is a lot of people have confused an actual progressive movement with something that's actually coming from a man who is younger than almost every other previous prime minister. And this
Yeah.
has been mistakenly considered modernism and progressivism and moving forward just because he's, in his 40s. And and so that's not really what's going on. You can't believe the legislation that they're winding up here. So I'd like to see where you guys are at further back and find out what kinds of improvements you're looking for, or what kinds of tactics. And you had a large meeting of some sort last week, or a rally or something. What happened there?
Yeah, we had a protest outside the Dáil, so outside our parliament. So basically, I'm sure you're familiar with Vera Toomey.
With who, sorry?
With Vera Toomey, she's actually heading this campaign. Like she was basically. I'll give you a bit of context.
Oh yeah, give us Vera Toomey. I've read it so spottily what's been going on there because it just came up on me. But who's Vera?
Yeah. So for Vera Toomey, she's from Cork in the south of Ireland, and basically she has a daughter called Ava who has a rare form of epilepsy called Dravet syndrome.
Oh right, yes,
Yeah.
I've read about Ava. Yeah.
Yeah, so so Ava was taking several seizures a day. They tried every medicine under the sun that's legal in Ireland, and it was having more negative effects than positive effects. So basically what Vera has done has kind of sparked this campaign of trying to get legal medicinal cannabis legalized in Ireland, and it was finally brought up last year, around this time last year, by a TD called Gino Kenny. He's from a small party called People Before Profit, and he brought up the bill, the medicinal cannabis bill, and that was actually being debated after a year, like last Thursday. So it took a year for it to finally arrive to the Parliament for debate. It was on its second stage. So the first stage was last year, and basically what they do is in the first stage they just kind of it gives a bit of context, a bit of introduction.
In Parliament.
In Parliament,
right? They're
yeah,
trying to pass the law.
Yeah. So but the first stage was relatively successful, and it passed through to the second stage. So that the second stage was actually on Thursday, so that's why.
Oh, I see. And your protest was before the second stage?
Yeah, it was just before the second stage. Vera came out. She was actually a bit of a mad day because she came from Holland. So her daughter is actually currently in Holland, in The Hague, in Holland, and she's getting her
medication
there because it's legal in Holland, or it's tolerated in Holland. But basically, on Thursday she came out and she gave a speech, and there was a few other people speaking, and then she went into the public gallery to actually look at the debate. But she actually Vera she collapsed out of exhaustion just before she went in, and it was a really dramatic day. So she was whisked off to hospital. But thankfully she's okay. But she eventually got back into the Parliament then to have a look at the debate. But basically, with the debate, it actually went much better than the sponsor expected. A lot of people were saying that a lot of TDs were saying that the bill is flawed and it can't go through to the next stage of.
That's the precedent, right? When you find a viable flaw that can be easily extrapolated into nonsense, or you found a maze that reaches no end and you can't get out of that part of the maze, legally speaking, you have to change the legislation and its writing before you actually pass it through. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So they basically what Gino Kenny is the sponsor. So he's the guy that brought the legislation to the Parliament. Basically what he did, it was a lot of effort. He got talking to other parties and explained that, look, I know I have these flaws. I can change this. Just push it through to the next stage, and we can deal with the flaws then. So, most
slippery slope.
Yeah, most of the major parties accepted that, and they said they will pass it through. So the vote on the legislation is next week.
Can you speak to the exact nature of how it was that the proposed original legislation that everybody has found, well, not everybody, not the people proposing it, but yourself and these other more reasonably minded people are finding flaws in it. Okay, so I understand that. And then the government has changed the legislation based on those flaws that were found, and I understand that. But how did you actually alert the government that there were flaws and that it needed to be changed and enact that? And the reason I ask is because the Canadian pending legislation has so many different conundrums in it that they're just ignoring. They're not considering the full science that is out there and has been printed. So this is a criminal act of negligence on its face.
Yeah.
And so how do you change it? Because where we're at in Canada is I can point out 20 things in this thing that aren't going to work. People more learned than myself, a higher number. But we can't seem to find purchase with the politicians listening to offer the reason why we would even want to change the legislation, and they're just steamrolling it through. So how did you raise their attention?
Well, I mean, how it first got brought up was because of Vera and our daughter, and it was a social media drive. Mainstream media only caught on to it after there was so much traction with social media, and it was just she asked people to bring it up with their local representative, and that's what happened, and it kind of just snowballed from there. And you know, the first reaction from the government last year, our health minister Simon Harris, he brought out this compassionate access program, which was an alternative to the medicinal cannabis bill. But basically, what the compassionate access program does, in very, very specialist cases such as multiple sclerosis, nausea from chemotherapy, and what's the other one?
Trying to go to sleep, trying to get off blood pressure medications.
No, it doesn't even cover that. Like it's
just a few things.
It's just a very, very limited amount of things, and basically what it does is you need to be under supervision of a doctor, but the problem is no doctor will recommend a treatment that's not legal in this
See, but that's where it doesn't work, because I don't know if you're familiar with my story, but I listened to my doctor. I went to an expert.
Exactly.
I was messed up, and he said, 3 strikes, you're out. You know.
Yeah, it's great. Like, I mean, I don't think they think it's true, Alan. You know, it's it just doesn't make sense, and they just steamroll it through, and you know, they say how great it is and how, you know, they're bending over backwards for patients, but they're not really. You know, it just doesn't. It just hits a brick wall.
Wow.
You know, and that's the frustrating thing about it. And our health minister has gotten an earful because of it, because he's, you know, people can see flaws. He like on one in one way he's calling flaws with the medicinal cannabis bill, but on the other hand, the bill he's proposing is just a complete flaw altogether. So, you know, he just can't win sometimes.
Well, you realize, right, that there are a lot of things that get discussed here, such as the people who want the cannabis legal are fighting it that way, and the people who don't are usually puritanical out of moral-based reasons that are completely on their face, or they're unaware of the science. But there's another issue regarding this, which is well, now we're going to deal with medical cannabis, and then we're going to deal with recreational cannabis. And the argument isn't even considered that it's the same thing. That if you were using enough cannabis in the first place, you know, from back when you were in the amniotic fluid and your mother was eating salads and smoothies and pastes and hummuses made from the seeds of this thing, and this was part of your food, then you probably wouldn't get sick later. But even if you did, you know, this stuff is already being wanted by your endogenous endocannabinoid system. And it's funny to me that people are not even, it's not funny, it's sick that people won't even consider the fact that enough proper, even non-psychoactive use of ingesting this thing as a crop, as a plant, as a crop that our animals were eating, so they were getting the CBDs and so on. So if you use enough of this and in a proper way, and you're having a salad and you're having a smoothie and you're making ice cubes and you're juicing it like wheatgrass, if you're doing that, that would be considered recreational or nutritional, and therefore you wouldn't even need it as medical. So they bifurcated this thing into two different arguments that aren't even real, and this shows to me the lack of genuineness in trying to understand this subject.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing about you know, they have and the main reason why the government has a problem with letting medicinal cannabis um, legal in Ireland is because they fear that it's going to leak to the to the common market. You know, like I mean, if other prescription drugs haven't leaked before, you know what I mean?
Right,
It's
exactly.
absolutely ridiculous, and we have a really bad situation here with benzos and various different prescription drugs where people are dying from it. Like they're, they're there's hundreds and hundreds of people every year that die from prescription drugs that are illegal.
Sure.
You know, if you
or the other
obviously-
methods, they got the little Ava is having a problem, and so we'll give her some pills or some oil of this.
We'll give her some opioids.
That's terrible. Or we'll cut her head open and see if we can, play around with her brain, because we don't want her taking a drop of oil. That's dangerous.
Yeah, it's absolutely nonsensical. Like,
Yeah. Oh, it's
say
so
about it,
frustrating. So how old are you? Let me find this out.
Yeah, I'm 27 years young. So.
Okay, good for you. And what is your group? Tell us about your group and how you organize to counter these nonsensical screeds.
Yeah, so I started up It Makes Sense last year. It's at the moment it's really just we have a Twitter and Facebook page. We have about 600 followers between the two. It's very small at the moment, but we're
makes
growing.
sense, folks. It Makes Sense is the Twitter handle.
Yeah. It's I think it's a very simple a simple phrase that people can latch onto. You know, I learned a lot about different campaigns. Like, I don't know whether you heard about the campaign last year, or sorry, at the start of this year, for the general election over in the UK, with Jeremy Corbyn. He's doing very well, and he had a very, very simple message.
Sure.
And I think this is a very simple message. Like, it does make sense. But basically, what we're trying to do, it's a movement to see the full legalization of cannabis, but we'll facilitate anything that will get near to that, and that's why we've been supporting Vera.
Well, you're familiar with Jeremy Corbyn's, one of his frontline ministers, the MP Paul Flynn, who says,
I think we have to say to those who put up with the barbaric stupidity and cruelty of government policy to act in a way of civil disobedience. We know most of the countries in the world allow this most ancient of medicines, been used for 5,000 years in every continent in the world. It's used for medicinal purposes. But I would call on people, and I know we're not supposed to do this as members, to break the law, to come here and use cannabis.
Yeah, I'd say more often than not, I'm going to find a way to get our great friend Paul Flynn, the parliamentarian from the UK Parliament, on the show. So there he is again. We'll be right back after this message from Shoppers Drug Mart. Shoppers Drug Mart, real uncomfortable with medical cannabis for a long part of its history, actively fighting to prevent its proliferation, and now they've decided to try to sell it on their own. Now they're promoting it. Now it's a good idea, and Canada hasn't even decided that they're going to be selling it in those. We're going to be selling it in Ontario in the liquor store. So this will be called Liquor Control Board of Ontario Pot. And I will put out the hashtag boycott LCBO weed. Boycott LCBO weed. We are going to try to change the government's mind using facts and science. It's easy to do. To present the science is difficult, though, because they're not listening. They're not paying attention. And I now refuse to believe it's just impossible. It's far too coincidental to think that they don't know these positive medical ways. They know. There's no way they can't know. They must know. Now, maybe not every single one of them knows, but enough of them know. Justin knows. They have access to this. They must have looked it up. They can't be pretending that they don't know how powerfully effective and relatively cheap it is. So to hell with Quebec telling its citizens they can't have plants in their house with the new law. have a plant in your house if you want one. I know a lot of people don't want to grow them because they don't want to be bothered with it and they just want to buy it. But if you want one, I would counsel you to find a way to get it done. Just have it in there. If there was a law against Blu-ray players, if there were a law against DVD players, if there were a law against vacuum cleaners, I'm going to have one in my house, and what are you going to do about it? Especially when I'm using it for a medical turnaround on a terrible disease. So this is incredible to me. But we're back to another repressive province tossing out some ridiculous laws. Specifically, though, back to Shoppers Drug Mart. They've now, they made it clear in 2016 early on, just after Justin announced things, that they wanted to sell this cannabis product after, I'm sure, feeling the pain from what people use it for pain. They don't sell as many over-the-counter meds. And why would you want to take something like that? And I can personally attest and consider that's what this is, that a whole summer and autumn of over-the-counter pain relief paled in comparison to 3 pinheads spread over 75 hours of cannabis oil. 3 pinheads. That's the same currency in just about every country. So the Globe and Mail wanted to do that. But when they made that announcement initially, public health specialists, as they call themselves, were worried that Shoppers Drug Mart will sell pot. I don't see any protests about the fentanyl-containing products, but from 24th of February 2016, leading public health and addiction specialists are condemning plans by Canada's largest drugstore to investigate the idea of selling marijuana, calling it a profit-motivated move that would have devastating effects. The only devastating effect would be if they somehow lobby to prevent the rest of us normal people from accessing what is within our rights. When are people going to hear this? The Globe and Mail reported on Tuesday that Shoppers Drug, this is a year and a half ago, that they are exploring the possibility of selling marijuana in their stores, and today they have made the move of hiring people, putting ads out to hire cannabis consultants and experts, and they're building the infrastructure already without even having permission and without already having been included in the government's plans thus far. Why would they do something like that? It could all blow up in their faces. Yeah, right. Like they haven't already paid somebody off, like they won't be finding a back door to get into what the booze store is already monopolizing here in Ontario. And I hope I'm wrong. And if I am, I'll give a little
Whoop of joy.
like Paul does. And here we go with the rest of this. Stephen Kelly, he's of the organization It Makes Sense, to break the law.
Yeah.
Do you have anybody like that other than Luke Ming Flanagan? Does he light up on the steps of the diet?
Well, I don't think he lighted up on the steps, but it's the thing is with Luke Ming Flanagan, he got a lot. The problem with Irish people, I don't know whether that's over in Canada as well.
Here we go. Okay, here we go. A little bit of racism. Here we go.
Yeah. No, we stigmatize people because they did one thing. So Luke Ming Flanagan, he's a very well respected MEP, but the one thing that people think about Luke Ming Flanagan is cannabis,
Sure.
And that stigma just stuck with him, and he got absolutely slaughtered in the mainstream media over it.
Wow.
And not only that, they found other things that were negative towards him, which meant that he was better off just going over to the.
Well, I can find some negative things about Justin Trudeau. First of all, him and his finance minister and the Queen of England over there, closer to you, were revealed as up to no good in the Paradise Papers. Almost everybody, the Facebook, Apple, Nike, these big corporations, these people, this Queen. She was asking for extra money from Parliament just a few years ago because it's bloody difficult to heat those gigantic castles, and it's not fair that she had to pay for it herself. So, of course, she needed to ask for extra money. I don't know if she got it or not, but even asking is horrible when you're involved in the Paradise Papers and setting up, shell corporations to protect your assets while your subjects are freezing in the dark in smaller houses. It's ridiculous. These people are a gang. It's a cabal of vampires, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, It's even with the UK, Alan. I mean, anything the UK bring out, it usually follows here about a year or two later. You know, even though we
Yeah.
fought for our independence almost 100 years ago,
Sure.
it's
Can you
still
tell me on that note? Can you tell me on that note? And I realize you're a different country with a different political system, but you're close. Come on, let's not kid each other. What's the buzz up north in Northern Ireland about all of this?
Oh well, so the north is a different conundrum altogether. So the north is the basically with the peace process and in 1998 there was an agreement called the Good Friday Agreement,
The
which
Good
basically
Friday Agreement. Yeah.
which basically uh, evens up the field for nationalists and unionists. So nationalists are people like me who want a united Ireland, and then unionists are people who want to wants Ireland to remain, or the north of Ireland to remain part of the UK. But basically, the way it's working out is Sinn Féin are on the nationalist side and the DUP are on the unionist side. The nationalist side is very progressive, and the unionist side is very, very, very
Old school.
Old school. Yeah, I mean they're
So Sinn Féin is the progressive arm in this. Is that what you're saying?
yeah. Well, in the north, yeah.
Compared to
well,
yeah.
it's
Wow.
yeah. I mean, it depends who you ask. I mean, if you ask the unionists, they'll say they're
I just wonder, were Ian Paisley still alive? Is he still alive? I don't think so.
Oh no, he died. Ian
Yeah.
Paisley died a few years ago.
Do we
Yeah,
do we
yeah.
have an idea where he was on this? Because he was a firebrand a long time ago. What did he?
Oh, I mean, like all the union. I think all the unionist parties, apart from one small party, I think called the PUP, but the unionist party up north, the DUP, the UUP, they're all against like cannabis. Like
And how many of them actually use it though? That say they're against it.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't really know, to be honest. I'm not familiar with their. All I know is they're against cannabis at all costs. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, it just reminds me of in the United States particularly, and I'm sure in other places around the world, you've got a lot of staunch evangelical heterosexual Christians preaching against anybody else doing anything, and then they get caught in a bathroom,
Yeah, that's the definition of the DUP, in my opinion.
Yeah.
A lot of them, they're very, very staunch Protestants.
The alcoholic prohibition in the 20s in the States. I mean, and they would be busting people for rum running, Canadians bringing booze down and everything else. They were arresting people. And then they would, be filling out their police reports and pull out a bottle of scotch that was illegal from the bottom drawer of the sergeant's desk. And he pounded a few of those back before he filed his report, and then go to the bar later that's in secret where the cops go and drink while it's illegal. So I figure this is the same way. These are the same methodologies over time. We're dealing with alcohol prohibition with a few changes, and that's where we're at with this stuff now, don't you think? That's the way it feels over here anyway.
Exactly. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of well, and not a lot, but some TDs and members of parliament up north would smoke cannabis. But I mean, they wouldn't. They in their opinion, they will think they will lose votes if that is seen, So, it's all about losing votes. They like, I mean, even though there's public, there's actually been a various number of polls over the last number of years, and usually it's between 60 to 70% in favor of legalization, but they don't seem to take that on board for some reason. I don't know why.
This is the thing that is jarring me as I dig deeper into this thing. And thanks for coming in and talking to us on Green Crush, all the way from Ireland, folks. It's a pre-recorded thing because we just couldn't do it on Tuesdays at 2:03 live. And so this is what's choking me about this, is that so many of these nations around the world are trying to pass it, are wanting to pass it. Most people, it seems, want to have it. And you also remember that of the people that don't partake and don't want to have it, they're also on board with, they don't want their sister or their brother or their son or their boss or their friend to get busted for this thing, because they understand, like I don't really drink alcohol, but I'm not out there telling you not to do it. So most people don't want these repressive laws, and they do want folks to be left alone, not have their lives ruined. That's a majority in almost every country, and yet once again you have this tiny cabal of freaks making sure we don't get what we want. And how it's amazing to me that we haven't found the linchpin to make that thing fall down.
Oh yeah, I mean that's it. That you hit the nail on the head. I mean, even in Poland, they recently legalized medicinal cannabis in Poland. I think about 2 weeks ago. You know, and at the moment you have a lot. Like I don't know whether you're familiar, but there's a lot of Polish people in Ireland, and you know, they were living in Ireland thinking that it's a much more, I don't know, progressive country, or it's a better place to live, and then you see they see their country, you know, stepping ahead, and you know, in relation to cannabis, and we're just left in the dark
Maybe
ages,
they're
you
going to
know?
move back, right?
Yeah, you know, I mean,
Wow.
it's just unbelievable. Really, it's unbelievable.
So when did you
Um,
start partaking of the substance, and how were you doing it, and knowing it was fully illegal? Like, what was the current, what was the day of, what were you in a younger teen, or did you get into it in your 20s,
um,
and how did you go about doing that?
I did it sparsely for the last, say, 5 years. You know, I was never really a big smoker, and I still haven't a big smoker, but I seen the the the, the, the the harm it can cause to someone if you're caught with it. You know, it's ridiculous, like, you know, and it's, yeah, I've a good few friends who smoke it, so that's how I got into it. But it's not something I'm really busy. Like I'm in college. I'm running this thing. I do an internship as well, and I do some voluntary work for a soccer club as well. So I'm pretty busy. So I
Sure.
very rarely get time to chill out. But when I do, it's to me it's a nice way to chill out, and you don't get a hangover the next morning. You know.
Yeah. Well, you don't always have to chill out with it, and go down the indica avenue. If you're trying to get a lot of things done, and you're focusing on things, and you want to
Yeah,
be creative,
sativa.
right into a heavy sativa at that point,
Mhm.
and that does different things. Of course, these are all different. Like beer is different from liquor, is different from wine.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, because in the illegal state, it's in. You don't know what you're getting. You don't know if it's in
Yeah,
it, or
that's the
you know. I
problem.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, and like I mean, the guy I get it off, he hasn't got a clue what it is. So you just kind of light it up and hope for the best.
Well, that might help sometimes with the price, but it's genuinely difficult. Now, you talk about quality issues like that because of the illegalities. My
Mm.
second round of using this stuff to pull myself out, when I had used a successful first round, things were going great. Then I started to slip again, and I thought, okay, well, stage 4 was really bad. Let's get back at it. If it were chemo, they'd be saying go back into chemo again. So I went for another round of this, and it wasn't really working very well. And I lost my faith. I thought it was over. I thought it was a short-lived deal. But when I was finally crashed from there and went to the hospital and got out of trouble with some additional help from removing some blockages internally through surgery and et cetera. And then when I got to that cannabis again and was back out, trying to recover from that, it wasn't very good. It didn't get me high at all. And I realized I was using this as a medicine, and it was flat in its agency, and that's because it was illegally obtained, and it was difficult to do, and you can't measure it the way all of the components of a can of Coca-Cola or some
Yeah.
snacking cake are measured. So, it's very frustrating.
Yeah,
Um,
and I mean, and that's it, like it just backs up the whole legalization situation, because, like, I mean, and there was I've heard of a lot of cases where you know, in order to increase its weight, people are lacing, or dealers are lacing you know, various harmful substances with the cannabis. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
it's into making it worse, where that
Fentanyl
wouldn't happen.
and various things. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
doing
it's
that.
it's. And thankfully, I've never got anything like that. But I mean, I've heard stories of it, and it's not very good. And then on the other hand, you have people such as someone in the media saying, "Oh, this is what cannabis does. It's really bad for you. Look at the effects of such and such person who took it." You know, but they're just completely missing the whole point of it. If it was legal, that wouldn't happen. You know,
Yeah,
if it was legal, it'd be much harder for a younger person to get cannabis. You know, it's
absolutely.
it's it's like it's just they don't look at the big picture. They look at their tunneled view of the world.
And they convince everybody that's it, because while they fret and moan about an opioid crisis and benzos and all those things, and what are we going to do? They're spending millions of dollars having conferences, and from inter-country conferences, and planners and health experts and getting together. We need to stop this fentanyl crisis. I don't see why that's so difficult. You go to where the opium is growing. Oh, good, we're already there protecting the fields. And then you make sure that it doesn't get shipped over here. And then you deny the pharmaceutical company the ability to take an illegal thing and turn it into something that's going to addict people and so forth. I mean, it's right there. Who made it? If cereal was illegal to eat Cheerios, you just need to stop the manufacture of Cheerios at the company that says they make it, which is what happens with these opioids. But it's like this big mystery to these idiots.
Yeah, like that's you know, in our on our placards on Thursday, it basically said that you know, don't let stigma and greed get in the way of genuine medicine. That's exactly what's happening, because the pharmaceutical industry in Ireland, I mean, it makes an awful lot of money, and it's proven that they will lose money if medicinal cannabis is legalized. And another effect, if cannabis is fully legalized, the drinks industry here in Ireland will completely lose out as well. You know,
The drinks industry.
Yeah.
No, this is what they call the alcohol distribution business, or beer, wine, and spirits. You're saying they're going to lose out when cannabis goes through? Why is that?
Well, I mean, I was looking at a few statistics. Was it sure Colorado, or I mixed up who it was, but I seen in one jurisdiction or one state, I seen that there was a statistic that alcohol consumption went down 25% when cannabis was legalized. You know, that would, I think, it wouldn't have that much, it wouldn't be as high here, but I can imagine it would go down a fair bit if it was legalized here.
Well, that's fascinating to think of, because if alcohol is so likely to take a hit from the proliferation of cannabis, I guess a good idea would be to have the alcohol people control the distribution of cannabis so that they can also profit from this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the thing is, in Ireland, Alan, we have a really bad alcohol problem. It's like it's really, really bad. Like, you know, and
Well,
they're
I
looking
wasn't going to mention that, but if you're doing it, yeah, I think there's a history of even almost racist-based jokes going back forever about the Irish drunk. You know, two Irish drunks walk into a bar. I mean, that's common. So you're saying that's still the case?
Oh yeah, I mean that's like, I mean, it's a kind of a stigma, but it's half true. You know, it's we do have a problem with alcohol. Our alcohol consumption is one of the highest in Europe.
I think one of the worst problems about it, though, is that a lot of those people that are so messed up on alcohol and have borne terrible, damaging grooves in their brain, a lot of them are the same people frowning upon the immorality of potential cannabis use.
Yeah, you know,
That's amazing.
And that's the thing as well. And we looked at a few different scenarios if it was illegal, and the argument against it is, oh, but why would you take someone off one drug and put them on another drug? Well, I mean, it's not exactly the same. Like, I mean, you know, if the effects of drinking alcohol and the effects of smoking cannabis is completely different, you know, and it has completely different effects. A lot of people, alcohol can make a lot of people very very angry and very what's the word, vicious, you know, and cannabis would usually have the opposite effect, you know. So that's the way I look at it, you know.
There's a fascinating thing I think about alcohol, is that having partaken of it myself, and I still do from time to time, in much lesser amounts than I avail myself of cannabis, but I'm not trying to save my life with alcohol. But when you have a lot of alcohol, there are two kinds of people after that. There's the person who just gets sillier and funnier, and he's slurring his speech and falling down, and everyone's having a good time, and he's one of the mates. And he's just a little more exaggerated in his, you know, he's dropped his inhibitions, if you will, a little more fun at the office party. And then there's the other kind of person who just turns into, like, it's Jekyll and Hyde. This guy's nuts now, and I can't even talk to him when he's drinking. But I can talk to him just fine when he's sober, no problem. But when he's drinking, he's long gone. He's lost it, and he'll get into fights. He'll say things he regrets later or forgets later. Alcohol affects the mind differently of different people. I think there's a tolerance, like some people can eat a certain kind of bread and others can't, etc. I certainly know this is true with cannabis. some people can't use it medicinally to the level they just cannot tolerate the any kind of psychoactivity, not even a nominal amount. The good news is use hemp instead. It'll be the same thing, and you'll get there more slowly, but it'll work.
Yeah, like, and it looks like it's what, less than 1% of people would have a genetic vulnerability that would, lead to schizophrenia in the case of taking
And certainly no reason to rule it out for everybody else that does benefit from it.
Yeah. And alcohol would have a similar effect. You know what I mean? Like, there's some people have alcohol that would just trigger something in their brain, and they just go AWOL.
Yeah, I know. I've seen it. So where are you now with this journey? You're waiting for the second the reading in Parliament.
Yeah, so we're looking. The vote will take place next week, and then assuming the vote is positive and it goes through, it will go through
One
to
more
the third
reading.
stage. Yeah, it'll go through to committee stage. So then they have a committee, and they debate it out in a committee. So it's
And at that time they might change things or delete things or add things to it to make everybody happy. And then it goes to the Senate, right? Do you have a Senate as well?
Yeah, we have a Senate. Yeah, so it'll go through the Senate, and then it would it would bounce around different parts of Parliament, and hopefully, I mean, it's been over, like, this is how slow Irish politics and Irish legislation has happened over the last year. It's taken just a year to get to the second stage, so I don't know how long that's going to take to be fully implemented.
But we know that it needs to go to the third stage, and it needs to then go from the third stage to the Senate, and then from then once the Senate is okay with it, and they could kill it. Even the third reading could kill it, the Senate could kill it, but if it all goes through, is it a law yet?
It's the second?
If the three readings go through successfully, and then the Senate says, okay, yeah, that's good, it's not quite a law yet, is it? There's one more step.
No, it's not quite a law yet. No, it needs to be signed into law. So
and that's called getting royal assent?
Yeah.
And you have that as well. So it's not until you have royal assent, after the Senate said yes, after the previous three readings, does it... And you're saying that the stages in between each of these is just abnormally long.
Yeah, it is. It's been working. It's been going very, very slowly over the last since this term of the Dáil. We had elections early last year, so it's been going very, very slowly because of the kind of political situation with Fine Gael, or with Fianna Fáil backing up Fine Gael. So it's just going at a very, very slow pace, but it's getting there slowly but surely.
And I wonder if there's been other different unrelated legislation passing through there far more quickly under the same process.
Oh yeah. I mean, if there's political will that goes through, I mean, there's a bill that currently is looking at minimum pricing for alcohol, and that's going through really, really quickly. So. And
again, the three readings, the Senate saying yes, and the getting of the royal assent, but it's just happening more quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it certainly seems like the majority of us don't really have much control over what the minority of us are doing. I mean, that was true with the Occupy movement. They talk about the 1%. This just keeps on being the problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, you think it's democracy, but it's probably another form of it. It's really, really frustrating.
The democratic illusion, I figure.
Yeah, I mean, and all this is happening, and then you just see Ava Ver's daughter in Holland. It's heartbreaking to look to see it. I mean, everything that happens in the Dáil, life still goes on outside. And it's really, really heartbreaking.
Well, I take some solace in that I'm speaking to somebody in Ireland right now who is a little bit further back in the legislation than we are in Canada. And the United States is ahead of Canada in some areas when Canada had the chance to take the lead at some point. It's in a different state of readiness or discussion in so many countries around the world, and we're all on the same team, and there's far more of us. So I hope we can somehow pool our resources and
hopefully
force the will of the majority on this one.
I'll be traveling to Toronto next year anyway. So.
Oh, definitely look us up. You can come in if we're still on the air and I'm not in jail or some kind of thing. You can come on down and we'll talk.
Yeah, sounds good.
Live in person. Well, I'd like to thank our guest for coming on today, Stephen Kelly, all the way from...
I'm from Dublin.
you're from Dublin. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Dublin, Ireland. How's the weather there today?
It's
Great.
drizzle rain.
Yeah.
It's absolutely freezing.
I'm sure I knew that before I asked the question.
Oh, I mean, like it's so predictable. It's ridiculous.
Will you stay in touch? We'll get back to you, and we'll see where you're at after the second and third reading. I want to follow this process carefully, as I do with other people in different countries of the world. So you'll tell us how it's going?
Absolutely, yeah. I'll give you an update as soon as I get it.
Okay, thanks very much.
Brilliant, Alan. Thanks a bit.